Right, we're rolling. On this podcast, we'll be talking about different areas of business and all things marketing. My name is Dave Doyle.
And I'm Dave Alton. This is Social Antics, another marketing podcast.
Are you gonna fucking start? The fuck is wrong with you? You know, by this stage every week.
There's no point in even starting. Yeah. How are you, Dave? How's things?
Fuck's sake. I'm just gonna do it because we've tried this a few times. Now we're not even deleting it. Now we're gonna go. Hi guys, welcome to Social Antics, another marketing podcast. We've got a guest today, Dave.
Me too. Who is it?
His name is Harry McCann, former UCC student. We're gonna do the intro in a second. But how was your week?
My week was very good, actually. Yeah. I couldn't wait to get back into the studio here to record.
That's a lie.
Well,
it's either the sign that you're a liar or a moron. It's one or the other.
I'll let you pick. How was your week?
Weekend was good. Busy week, good weekend.
Enjoying the sunshine?
Out enjoying the sunshine, yeah. I saw my grandmother for the first time in about 2 years because of COVID. I learned that she was horrified. I learned that at one point in time, I don't know when, I didn't go into the gory details, she turned on the podcast. Her angelic son was, grandson was effing and blinding and saying whatever he did about Mark Zuckerberg, and she was not impressed.
Who put that cop shite on it?
exactly like that. So yeah,
more important,
you always forget what.
Where's my Rascal Bruin?
It was limited edition.
It's alright, okay.
Plus, I don't like you that much.
That's right. I didn't get you the crisps either.
I won out there, I reckon, somehow or another.
Right, so this week we have Harry McCann on. Looking forward to chatting to him. So we'll go straight into it.
Yeah.
At just 22 years old, the Irish award-winning entrepreneur has established himself in the business and political world, not only as a thought leader, but a powerful voice for youth. Not only does Harry have an extensive background in youth affairs, public speaking, and entrepreneurship, but Harry is also a respected journalist and presenter, who regularly features on TV, podcasts, and radio. Harry, welcome to Social Antics. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. What's your coming towards the end of the summer? What's it like? What are you up to?
Yeah, it's strange. It's the first summer in my life where I'm not voluntarily going back to education, but I suppose, when you're at school each year and you're getting ready to go into a new year, and then obviously after school, most of us go to college, and I'm prepared to go to college. And then obviously I finished in UCC in May, so I'm now going to do a master's in September. But it was the first time ever where I've kind of said all of my educational responsibilities are done and dusted with. I can go back if I really want to, but I didn't have to. So it's a bit of a strange one, but I've opted for the extra year. So I'm back to education.
And what did you study? And what are you going into study?
So I did digital humanities and IT in UCC. Still don't know what that was exactly. Very enjoyable 3 years. And then I'm going to do political communications in DCU. So completely different kettle of fish for my sins.
But more probably down the route of what you do.
Yeah, I suppose originally I did look at government and politics in UCC, and that was what I was really interested in. But I'm not academically particularly bright. I managed to get through things. I managed to get through the Leaving Cert and through college. But I kind of opted for something that was a bit more hands-on, a bit more practical. And I thought with the kind of computer aspect of things, I'd be a bit better off than trying to write thousands and thousands of words. But as time's gone on, I'm kind of a bit more confident now academically, so I'm hopeful that I'll manage to make it through this master's. But it's a bit more relevant to what I'm kind of hoping to do and what kind of the aspirations are.
And I gave a kind of I suppose, a very broad kind of introduction to yourself. Introduce yourself. What exactly? Who exactly is Harry McCann? What do you do?
Yeah, other than being a complete spoofer.
Welcome to another two here.
Successfully spoofing for the last God knows how long. So look, I started my first business when I was 15 to teach kids about coding, computer coding, which was a passion of mine growing up. And after I started that, I suppose I always just think there was a kind of a ripple effect. It was one thing led to another. I started a thing called the Digital Youth Council then, and the Digital Youth Council was the first of its kind in the world at the time, and was a model to basically bring young people together to be a voice in science, technology, engineering, and maths, more commonly known as STEM. And we worked with governments, and we worked with big businesses here in Ireland, try and basically and around the world to give young people a voice in an important topic at the time. And it still is, I suppose. It's very trendy and very relevant, but things like data protection, online safety, education in the space. And we've worked with everybody from your Facebooks to your Googles to the European Commission. And as I said, the Irish government on that. And that was very successful for a number of years. And we implemented a lot and got to change quite a bit of policy. And then that model was replicated into the UK and the Netherlands and to Canada, and most recently, which is quite a strange one. But moving on then from that, I set up Trendster Media, which is probably my most latest venture, and that's just digital media. So it's kind of putting all of the tools and tricks that I've learned over the years and kind of my passion and I suppose what I'm half decent at to good use, for businesses, individuals, all that kind of crack. So there's nothing too fancy to it. I suppose it's just a younger person's perspective on digital media and marketing, and trying to add a bit of a new touch to things. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Between that, then I do a lot of media stuff. As you said, I contribute a lot to conversations on young people and on kind of the future of everything. And I tend to be the token young lad, I think. And that's to put it frank, but it's funny because people they've no shame in saying that. I know for a fact, any researcher or booker will call up and they'll go, any chance you're free? And I'm going, yeah. And they go, what age are you now? And I'm like, I'm 22. And they go, yeah, you're still young enough. That's fine. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'd like to think I'm still young for another couple of years, but my USP is slowly fading.
and kind of doing a bit of research on what you do in the companies, and I came across another interview that you did, and basically you were just saying they're kind of becoming an advocate and speaking out for young people and all that. And I seen one of the lines that you kind of using it was, and it's a well-known phrase, but young people should be seen and not heard. It's a kind of very general phrase. We hear it a lot. When you hear something like that, what does that make you feel?
Yeah, I suppose, look, from my point of view, it's frustrating because a lot of the time I'm brought in after the conversation has been had over and over again. So usually there's uproar about something that young people have done in some way, shape or form. And we've overanalyzed it in the media for weeks and weeks. And then I'm brought in and somebody goes, well, what do you think? And I'm going, well, like, this conversation is kind of irrelevant and it's unnecessary and could have been avoided in the simple case that when you look away in the room and you're having a conversation about young people and the youngest person in the room is a 50-year-old, you can go, it's not really a fair conversation. Yeah. And when people go unrepresented in these conversations, they become scapegoats and they become, the blame for everything. And that's what happens a lot. And it happened a lot during COVID-19. I was brought in conversations where people were talking about, what was happening in colleges. And I'm like, you haven't stepped foot near a college in about 20 years. And I go, when you did, there was no such thing as the internet. I'm like, you can't talk about what college life is like as somebody who's never even been near it or hasn't been in it in God knows how long. So it's annoying because I think a lot of the time young people get stick purely because we're underrepresented or unrepresented in a lot of conversations. And if there was a case where there was more tokenistic young lads like myself, we'd probably be a bit better off. But yeah, look, it's so old Irish, I suppose, to be seen and not heard. But I've kind of tried to push back on that as much as I possibly can over the last few years. And I think a lot of more young people have, especially with social media now being so prominent. It's a great opportunity to really speak up and be heard.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that you made there. But I also think that the problem is with a lot of conversations that happen around young people, like you said there, the token young fella, i.e. every young fella is the same or all young people are the same. And it's that generic kind of term. Whereas if you've one young person on, all right, they're speaking for all young people, where you probably have, again, several gray-haired, middle-aged to elderly old men there as well, talking about the same conversation, rather than having three young people with differentiating opinions, for example, which is what we kind of should be leaning towards. And that kind of interests me in terms of the idea of the Digital Youth Council. Can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of, I suppose, how it worked for a start, and then how you actually went about impacting on policy and what that actual policy was? Because it seems like a very, very, like, obviously, look, young people are always underrepresented. And I think it's very, very interesting to see an organization like that impacting governments, working with big organizations like Facebook, Virgin, so on and so forth. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so look, I completely agree. And, like, I've often turned down the opportunity on multiple occasions to be that tokenistic young lad for the pure fact that I just can't speak for everybody. I can't speak for a generation. It's not possible, And I've always tried to do that where I think if you're going to have a panel or you're going to have a conversation, you know, I lean one way in a lot of things, and I'm quite, you know, I'm not very, I'm more conservative on a lot of things, and I suppose very traditional as well. So I don't think I should be that voice for everybody my age. And that was what the Digital Youth Council was, to be honest, was that I built quite a good platform. I'm good on social media. I'm good communicator, and I tend to get my point across well, and I tend to be the go-to person for that. What the Digital Youth Council was to find people like myself, who were like-minded, but I suppose not necessarily had the exact same views, and who were able to represent the voice of the generation that we were trying to represent. And the Digital Youth Council was, give or take, about 10 to 15 people every year. And they were from all over the country, which is a massively important point as well, because when we talk about technology, there's a difference, even like things like Wi-Fi. There's a very big difference between Wi-Fi in Donegal and Wi-Fi in Dublin, you know. One is non-existent, the other is fiber optic and high-speed broadband, you know. So that was a big thing, is geographically there's a huge difference in what it's like to be a young person. From an age point of view, it's a huge difference. From an economic point of view, so we brought together people from all walks of life. We sat around the table and we were going, what are the issues that are important to us? And after that, it was reaching out to all of these important people who a lot of the time were speaking to us to tick a box on a form. Realistically, you know, when you put policy together, they were like, we spoke to the young people, we spoke to the old people, we spoke to the middle-aged people, and we were just one of those boxes. And yeah, look, I think in a lot of cases we were successful in those conversations, and we did implement a lot of really positive change on all levels. And a lot of those companies were very willing and very open to speaking to us and implementing the change. And as time went on, we became more influential because we had the conversations with those people in the past. But look, I think my biggest frustration with the whole thing was I was walking into rooms with people who were not even half my age and were kind of looking at me as if I was their son, or, you know, their grandson in some cases. And I'm kind of going, how seriously are they taking me? And the real answer was, a lot of the time, probably not very seriously, unless you found the really good people who you do come across often enough.
I think I like, so say for example, my when I kind of started out going into an area of business and marketing and all that kind of stuff, I was kind of focused more on the hospitality side of stuff and music, and I like hospitality paid the bills for me, and I kind of started working my way up in terms of bar manager, restaurant manager. I was doing a lot of that kind of work, turning into operation manager roles. I was very young doing those kind of roles. I was 21, 22, never mentioned my age anywhere, tried to hide it, tried not to mention, because it was going against me. So like, you're going on the opposite, you're mentioning it and it's still going against you. You know, it's interesting to see both sides of it.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny because I have, from day one, I've always done that. I've always made it very clear what age I am, because in some cases it's helped me. Like, I've had conversations in rooms that many people would struggle to get into. And I often find it's because I start off, and the very first line of all my emails used to be, you know, hi, my name is Harry McCann. I'm 15 years old or 16 years old. I'm a student in such and such. And instantly, you know, they're gonna respond, because you don't want to be the ass that didn't respond to the 16-year-old who took their time out of their day to email them. But they also then try to facilitate it as much as they can. As I said, I had some really mad opportunities over the years, and I'm guaranteed because it was that. But in a lot of cases, you sit around the room and you're kind of like, is anybody even listening to me here, or am I just here for a box ticking exercise? And you look, there's probably a social science about it. You could probably work it out in the end. It probably did work out more times for me than it didn't. But I think at the end of the day, we sometimes look at people and base their experience off of their age, whereas I don't know how fair that is or how right that is, because I've met people who are twice my age who, to be honestly, I wouldn't trust tying shoelaces, never mind leading businesses or doing anything half important. So I don't know. Sometimes age is only a number, and I think that's probably what we need to think about a bit more.
Do you think that there's enough, and I'm going to be careful about how I phrase this, but do you think that
think about it.
Do you think so? Like, I mean, even ourselves, like, I mean, I would be guilty is the wrong word, but I mean, I would have an issue with certain, the way certain influencers, inverted commas, it's a very, very broad term, go about their business. Others are very, very impressive in terms of what they do. We were slagging off OnlyFans content creators last week, whereas in reality, Joe, do you think there's enough of getting, again, OnlyFans content creators, influencers, younger kind of TikTokers who've been making a name for themselves literally just since the start of COVID? Do you think there's enough of those type of voices present in
traditional media, and then there are so many people who are uneducated because we don't actually talk about any of this stuff. We immediately assume, they're OnlyFans, they're getting their bits out online. That's not interesting to talk about or sort of illicit in some way. Do you think that there should be more contributions from these people who are culturally very, very impactful, but because they're not seen as mainstream news or they're not journalists per se, they're kind of not, they don't have any impact or very, very little impact in terms of traditional media, which a lot of older generations would still kind of look towards, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation. So I've been very critical of influencers in the last God knows how long. I've from the beginning, it's not really a trend I've jumped onto massively, and it's because they come and go. They tend to be, there's the flavor of the month in the sense that, the guy to the left, he is really popular now and he'd be very popular for a couple of months. And then there's the guy from the right comes along or the girl from the left and whatever. So it's one of these things that these voices fade and they go and they come, and it tends to just be, they kind of ride the trend a small bit. I think at the moment there's some voices that get far too much attention and some that don't get enough attention, in a sense that the OnlyFans conversation is probably the best one. We have a lot of conversations about it in the media, especially since the announcements of their talks about removing explicit content and so on and so forth. And again, I laugh because you're going to go, the people we're talking to about it are people who have never looked at the platform, have no idea what it's about, and have no real, they've nothing in the game. They've no stake in the game, and whether you think it's right or you think it's wrong, it's a moral decision, and it's up to every individual to decide themselves. But at the end of the day, you can't have a fair conversation and understand it properly until you speak to somebody who makes X amount a month off of it, who relies on it to pay their rent and pay their bills. And I think a lot of time we're quick to jump to the conclusion that, they pull their bits out to make a bit of extra cash and then go holidaying and I beat that every month. Some people take their bits out to go and make money to put themselves through college. And I've seen reports, I've seen studies on it in the US and in other countries where college is a lot more expensive than it is here, where people have to use it to make ends meet. And, it's a really sad and unfortunate situation. But the problem is you don't hear those stories often enough because we put the 3 or 4 pundits who don't even know how to use their phone most of the time to talk about an app or an application that they've never even looked at before and make judgment on people whose lives they've never even heard of or shoes they've never walked in. So I think from the influencer point of view, a lot of them do have a lot to say about culture at the moment and what's happening in society. And I think they should be given more of a platform. We're a bit afraid of them because, they tend to be a bit more explicit online, or they tend to be a little less held back. And that's not what we want in traditional media, especially here in Ireland. But the time will come where, they'll push to them. And I have seen that more recently. I've seen a few people getting radio slots in places and some local radio even who are TikTok famous, who seem to be kind of the flavor of the month at the moment, but are going to push their way into traditional media. And whether that's right or wrong, I suppose that's the conversation to be had.
And do you, in terms of you using social media, obviously you're quite kind of outspoken on a lot of platforms. I think I even jumped in on one. I think that's when I kind of first started getting talked to you, maybe about 2 years ago. I remember seeing someone giving out to you the age card. Someone was having a go at you about what gives you the right to speak on someone's behalf or whatever, something like that. And I got involved in it as well. I don't normally get involved in those kind of conversations. Try not to anyway. But from being outspoken, do you find yourself getting a lot of, we talk all about hate messages and, kind of pure negativity online. Are you receiving much of this kind of stuff? The dark side of social media, would say. So
social media has been an interesting one for me in the sense that it's given me an awful lot. It's given more to me than, I suppose, in a good sense and a bad sense. So like I started out doing what I was doing, and I started up a Twitter account, and that has given me so much over the years, connections, opportunities, and so on and so forth. So I'm a huge fan of social media. I'm outspoken, but I'm funny enough, and a lot of people will laugh at it because they know how outspoken I am on subjects. I'm also quite reserved on a few things. There's things that I don't speak about because of the fact that I know.
Well, you're not speaking for the sake of it. You speak on something that you feel like you need to, or you feel like you should jump in. You're not just throwing a fishing rod out and hoping someone will catch it for the sake of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I can, and like I know for a fact there's 10 times a day I hold myself tweeting something, and I know if I put it out, I could be on the radio in the afternoon, or some journalist will ring me for a newspaper quote in the morning, and I know I could do it, and I just don't, because look, from my point of view, I try to work with brands and organizations and brands and companies who are of a certain caliber, and I know that they don't look fondly upon those, erratic outbursts on social media. So I try to hold myself back a small bit. But I think, yeah, look, I get abuse, but I kind of laugh it off. I don't really pay much attention or give much value to people who I've never met before in places I've never been to before, who I'll probably never meet. It's funny, and like I do, and people who are in my close friends group on Instagram will see often enough. I sometimes reshare some of the funny messages I get after a radio interview, and it's very funny. Like it's awful funny, because I'm like, some accounts have actually dedicated themselves to just posting about me and how I'm it's usually something to do with a political party or two, and how I'm up there something or licking there something, and I'm like, okay, I'm like, relax a small bit here. I'm like, I'm living in your head rent free. You need to step back from this. So I look at it from that point of view, and I get it sometimes. I get it more times intensely, and sometimes a little more relaxed. But it just doesn't impact me. It really doesn't. And I know it does impact some people, and it's not right, and I don't encourage and I don't promote it. But I just look at it and kind of go, for what it is. It's some guy in some bedroom with a keyboard in front of him who thinks he's great, and realistically won't get much attention anyway. So I don't add much value to it, but I do get it. And I think most people do, but I have a very small audience in comparison to most. So I can only imagine getting that, every single day nonstop is probably very mentally draining, and does have an impact.
Do you think that, because like look, you're very, very pro technology, right? You wouldn't have set up digital accounts and all that stuff if you were. Do you think that because of that, and I saw your show when I think it was Eating with the Enemy, I think it was on RT. Do you think that because you're kind of wheeled out as no, technology is great and young people know about technology, I'm generalizing here now, obviously for the purpose of this, but and technology is good and young people use it and a lot of other people don't understand it necessarily. Do you think that sometimes that the nuances of your argument probably get lost because Eric is the young fella who just loves technology and to hell with the consequences of it? Do you think that's a bit of an issue for some of the stuff that you've done publicly, I suppose?
Yeah, and like my views have changed in years gone by, like I'm very happy to admit that as I've gotten older, I can see some of the pros and some of the very obvious cons that I would have missed growing up, things that I was young and naive and looked at social media as being a fantastic tool to communicate. But at the end of the day, it's also a very nasty place. And, we all seen the Netflix documentaries, we've all seen, the shows about what negative impacts technology have on our everyday lives and what they do with our data and what it does to our mental health. And I suppose I did buy into that dream of a connected world. I do have that, romanticized idea of what technology is about and what social media can be in the world. But I also understand the negatives to it. And I think what a lot of people don't have is those two perspectives. And in the conversations I have with people either love it or they absolutely hate it. And nobody can really look at the middle ground. I think it's a lot to do with social media now, is because we all feel that we have to pitch our tent in some half or the other half. We can't just sit on the fence and go, okay, let's hear both sides. Let's discuss both sides and let's come up with, real ideas that are backed up by facts and statistics and science. And, I speak an awful lot about this idea that people look at one or two incidents. They use, evidence, what's the word I'm looking for, and it's not coming to my mind, but they use personal experiences and try to push that across as being pure fact, and I don't think that's right in a lot of times. And I think what people need to do is kind of be happy enough to sit in that middle ground on that fence and understand what both sides have to say. As you said, I get wheeled out for shows like Eating with the Enemy, where I have to pick one side and the other person has to be the other side. But I think anybody who watched that will have seen that I actually didn't jump down the other person's throat, and she didn't jump down my throat either, because we both understood where we were coming from and both agreed that changes need to be made no matter what. And that's what I think technology is it's ever evolving, it's ever changing. You can't have one view or another view. You need to be open to both sides and make your mind up based on the evidence and the facts.
And in terms of specifics then, so you mentioned there ideas that you might have or something like that. If you take social media as a very, very broad concept at the moment, and there's what is there, about 7 of them now, and they all do the exact same fucking thing. But if you take all those, is there a few 2 or 3 key points that you would do if you were either a policy change or if you were a CTO inside Facebook, or at any level, or from either side of either political or from the market position? Is there anything at the moment that you would just go in and change in terms of the way the platform works, in terms of a user experience, in terms of policy, in terms of anything like that? What are the few things that you think, if we did these things, we might have a really, really interesting platform here?
Yeah, I think there's a number of conversations being had. The biggest one I think that's been had and does need to be looked at more is this idea of providing ID. some
definitely.
form of identification to verify who you are so that you can go onto these platforms. And I think there's very few places or very few walks of life where you can't do that, or you can get away with being anonymous. And I don't think the internet needs to be that place, because at the moment it's turned into a place of no law, really. And you know, there just needs to be a structure to it. And I think that would be a really good first step. Now, I don't want to be the person who's going to put the pros and cons to all these, but the cons of that was pointed out to me very fairly by somebody who said that in certain situations, people like to use these platforms anonymously for good reasons, in the sense that they want to express their views on something, or sometimes they just want a place to be able to talk and be themselves. So if somebody is struggling with their identity or with their gender or with who they are or who they want to be, they'd like to do that anonymously. And I can understand that. And sometimes people feel that they're persecuted and they're in a situation where they can't speak their own mind and they can't be who they are. And I have seen that too. So I put that across, but I do think that's a very small problem, and it's a very small minority. And unfortunately, the majority outweighs them in this case. So that's the first change I'd make. From a complaints point of view as well, I would like to see more real people behind the complaints platforms to these places. So I know from speaking to them in the past, they'll all argue that, you know, firstly, it's very grueling work and it can be quite difficult for people to do it and to go through all of these complaints. But like, I had a comment a couple of months back about me and it was horrific. Like, I couldn't even repeat it word for word, but it was horrifically bad. And I remember putting it through Twitter, and it wasn't that it really bothered me, but I just didn't want it sitting there, you know? And I put it through and they came back and said, no, it wasn't against our terms or our terms of service, and it didn't break this and didn't break that. And I'm going, there's no way, there is absolutely no way that this doesn't break your term of service. Like, you can follow up the complaint with an email to so and so, and I'm like, oh, I didn't even bother. But I think a lot of the time, if we had some people behind those complaints and looked into them and really dealt with them and addressed them, the platform would be much better places and things would get resolved more quickly. And then, yeah, generally, I think it could be a bit more responsibility sitting with those platforms as well. They are the publishers, you know, any other platform in the terms of a newspaper or a radio show or a television show would be responsible for what the people say when they're on them. And I think from a social media point of view, a little bit more responsibility. I'm not saying all of the responsibility, but a little bit more should sit with them, and they should, you know, pay the price for what's being said on their platforms and done on their platforms.
No, I think the two things you brought up there, we've spoke about on the show before, and we strong advocates that, yes, I actually, it's interesting. I've never heard, I don't know if you have, but that side of the, you know, people wanting to be anonymous for a reason. You know, I didn't think of that.
I don't
side
buy
of
that.
things.
I don't buy it for a second.
Look,
I think it's nonsense.
I think look, if you're on there to, the problem is if people are on there for freedom of expression and want to express their views, the problem is, as you said, the majority is for negative reasons, you know, so it far outweighs. I don't know what kind, you know, look, I personally, I still think that the ID should be definitely come into effect. It was interesting as well what you said there in terms of you know, complaints department, which is also something we talked about, and we talked a lot around the whole at the time of Trump and fake news, and you know, it came up a lot then that if something is being flagged hundreds, if not thousands of times, there should be someone there flicking the button at the end and saying, no, this is not there. Get rid of it.
It's a difficult job that I think I know what you're referring to. You hear about these guys. There was an office up in Dublin at one point, and they were basically screening all the videos that came through on Facebook. Yeah. And you had beheadings, child pornography, just the most horrific of things. And people had to get like serious treatment afterwards, which is where the platforms come into it, right? Because that problem goes away if everyone is verified.
Yeah.
So there's things that you can do which solve other problems. And the one that you said there at the start is absolutely spot on. Verify absolutely everyone. Yeah. And I know you weren't advocating for the argument that was made to you.
No,
but
I mean, I should point that out. So this was, I put up a thing a few months back where I said hashtag no face, no name, no tweet, in the sense that I wouldn't interact with anybody who just didn't.
Oh, that's good. You can see why he's good at telecommunication. Well, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, it's a great way of just saying, I don't want to talk to you.
Look, that's one, right? So like, I had put something out in the media and I'd said something that was really controversial, and a lot of people had come back, and I was like, look, I can't be dealing with all this abuse from people. And I was like, I'm not going to respond to everybody, and I'm particularly not going to respond to some individual who can't put their name and face behind it, because at the end of the day, I say what I mean what I say, and I put my face and my name behind it, and I'm happy to take the brunt of whatever it is, but I also expect people to engage with me on the same level. Now, a handful of individuals came back and said exactly what I put across there about the fact that they do it for a certain reason. But look, it's a small minority, and I think there might even be a way around it. But realistically, that when look, when you look at it from a plain, simple point of view, which is that people put anonymous accounts because they don't want to stand by it. And because most of the time they're saying stuff that their employers wouldn't support, they wouldn't actually say in person to your face, and that they're doing it because, they're bored and they're taking it out
Just
on
looking
people.
for controversy
Yeah.
for the sake of it, like, really.
Shocking. And it's so frustrating, because I know that people go back and they go, oh, he has no response for me. Like, I've outwitted him. And I'm like, no, you haven't. It's just that you're an absolute tool who won't put your face behind what you're saying. And I'm not going to stoop to your level. But anyway, that's my moan of the day.
And what, in terms of the Digital Youth Council and everything that's going on there, what areas are you kind of focusing on really now at the moment? Is there, what are the main areas that you're looking at?
So in recent years, the biggest focus has always been on things like data privacy is a big one, and online safety. I know globally, any of the youth councils who are working on big issues are along the same lines. And it's important, online safety in particular for kids. I've heard horror stories. Like, I have heard horrific stories, and I'm more on a European level, but I was at a conference a few months back where I was listening to parents speak about, not a few months, sorry, a year or two now, obviously with COVID. And I heard parents speak about their children who had taken their own lives because they just couldn't handle the abuse they were getting, and they didn't know where to go, and they couldn't turn it off, and they couldn't get away with it. And that to me is really scary and frightening. And like, it's a very small number of people, but it's far too many as well. And I think we don't hear about it often enough, but suicide is a very big issue in this country and around the world still. And I think social media has a huge part to play with it from a young person's point of view, especially for mental health, is that a lot of them go to school, and everyone's gone to school and everyone's had a bully at some stage in their life. And you go to school and you listen to that and you come back and you go, oh, I have to go to school again tomorrow. But the problem is now they go to school, they come back and they have to listen to it on Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever it is, So that to me is a really big issue, and it's something that a lot of the platforms recognize, and a lot of them are putting tools out to try and stop that. But it's also a complete educational thing as well, because I don't think it's really anything to do with platforms or technology. I think it's to do with how people sometimes don't feel that their words have as much power when they type them into a keyboard and put it onto a platform. They sometimes think that's less significant or less impactful than it is saying it to your face. So I think that's an educational thing, and that's what we've really pushed from the beginning, is that young people should be taught about technology and how to use social media in schools and how to behave online and their digital footprint and all those important topics in school. Because look, we teach about sex education because sex is a normal part of life, and most people will do it at some stage or another. Same things with technology. Somebody's going to have a phone at some stage, they're going to go on social media, so it should be part and parcel. I'm not saying it should be the same class, but it should be part and parcel.
Yeah, it's different. It must be tough as well, because I know a lot of and like, they couldn't teach about, again, most teachers can teach about sex because most of them have had it, whereas a lot of them haven't been on TikTok, nor do they understand it. Absolutely. And I think and they've never gone through. So I was listening to an interview recently enough, and they basically said that if you were bullied as a young fella, when we were growing up, everything was kind of physical. It was in your face. And even if it was verbal, it was physical. It was in your face. It was shouting and roaring. Whereas with bullying online, it's more relational. It's more the kind of picking, and it's again more associated with your kind of mental health. And again, ultimately, if you keep on getting punched in the arm, okay, your arm's going to get sore, but you're going to get better. Whereas if you're young and you don't know how to deal with relational bullying over a period of time, that's where all the problems come from. And it's the bully's best tool. If he wants to bully something and you can send someone who disappears, and if you don't screenshot it, then, oh, well, you're a rat or whatever the story is, you screenshot what I sent to you. Like, it's a bully's dream if you wanted to use these platforms to go after someone,
Yeah, it is. And like, I grew up in a really interesting time when I suppose I was what I'd call a part of Generation Tech. So I grew up just at that stage when everyone was getting their Nokias. So everyone was texting each other. And I remember it was very funny whenever you used to fancy a girl, you'd compare how many times you've texted her compared to how many times your mate texted her, because the phones used to be able to count how many times you'd sent like a snap streak.
I sure remember that, yeah. You can only do so much. You'd have to delete the trailer.
Web text.
Oh, phenomenal technology. But as time went on, then obviously it was into things like Snapchat and so on and so forth. So I suppose I've seen that progression, and I think I'd never want to grow up now. I'd never want to have grown up with the smartphone, in the sense that I wouldn't want to be my first introduction to technology. I think I was kind of weaned into it a small bit And I think it's a a bully's paradise, in the sense, as you said, it's a lot of the time it's very hard to really hold them responsible, because they do delete it, they get rid of it, they use platforms that are designed for that reason. And I think most kids just aren't equipped with the tools or the mindset to be able to handle that, and it's a really sad situation.
I think as well for parents and teacher, I don't think they're equipped either, really, to be honest. Because how could you be like, everyone, like, okay, everyone's parents are a generation behind, obviously, because it's a generation behind. But with technology, the way it changes so often, you can understand how a parent now, or a parent that grew up just before the kind of tech boom, wouldn't be even able to comprehend how kids are communicating in a variety of different ways. And again, the concept of OnlyFans, like, what was the Tommy Tiernan joke? It wasn't so long ago we couldn't be left-handed in this country. Never mind an OnlyFans account. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's totally changed. In terms of you, Harry, then, like, I mean, so obviously you've been digital youth council, you've got your own kind of media stuff. You've obviously done a lot of stuff with media. You're writing for Irish Times, News Talk stuff, Journal. Do you ever see yourself getting into politics or something along that, or are you more of the guy in the background pulling the strings? What do you think the future holds?
They're called marketers, aren't they?
Yeah, consultants, political strategists, I believe they wrap it up as. Yeah,
consultants. Yeah, look, I go back and forward on it multiple times. If you had asked me when I was growing up, when I was a child, like a small child, what I wanted to be, I would have told you I wanted to be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Based on my very little understanding of
Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
Oh, yes, I was obsessed. Now, I mean obsessed with David Cameron, right? And I don't know why. And I have no idea why, but it's embarrassing now, given all that has happened in recent years. But I was obsessed with politics even as a small child. I just loved the idea, I suppose, of the power, really. If I'm
you reckon we can get McCann's a tan trending after this?
Yeah, this is not going to go down well. In the interest of honesty, that's what I wanted to be, and I never.
Good to be honest. It's good to be honest.
I'll never forget it, because I remember as a child, people were like, "Ah, you won't want to be that for long. You won't want to be that for long." And then I suppose I soon realized why you would not want to declare that you wanted to be Prime Minister of the UK, given our relationship and history. But as time went on, then I wanted to be Taoiseach, and I always wanted to be Taoiseach, and like that was up until I was well into my teens, up until I was probably about 16 or 17. I think I did a piece in the Ray Darcy Saturday show where they were like, "What's the future hold?" And I was like, Taoiseach. So that was my aspirations. But as time went on, I suppose I've kind of changed in a sense. The first one is, I think you get a lot of hassle and less praise, more hassle. And I don't think it's very easy to get things done. And I'm often of the opinion that, unfortunately, while being on the inside used to be a great way of getting things done, I think being on the outside is probably a better way to be able to influence those people and influence policymakers, because if you have that attention, if you have that spotlight, you can influence those people to do a lot of things. And I think that's something that I'm probably looking more to now than actually getting into politics. And I think my mother's happy about that, because she's fond of the idea of having a politician in the family. Not just because of the traits of politicians, but I think the abuse and the backlash wasn't something. And I'm not really into this whole localized government thing either. And I say this now, and it might be for the sins of me, but I'm not really into the small, day-to-day stuff of trying to get things done locally. I'm more of a bigger picture person, and I think that Ireland has a huge role to play in the bigger, wider world. And I'd like to be the person behind that. I'd like to be maybe a European level where we're actually trying to influence real change, not trying to get potholes fixed,
Which I think it's, as you said there, like having that kind of independence, that you're not tied to anyone, you're not having to shut your mouth when you're told, if that makes sense. I think that is a far more powerful,
a pre-contrived ideology based on whatever party you're in, basically.
Exactly.
You have to behave this way.
I've always been asked this question. I get asked all the time, is what political party do you support, or where are your political allegiances? And I've always said I have none, because I really don't think there's a benefit to having them. Like, obviously I lean a certain way politically. I famously said that I'd never date a shinner. So you can be fairly clear that I'm not that side, right? But I generally don't support any party, right? And I just don't see the benefit in, because I'm an individual. I have my own thoughts and ideas. And while one political party may be a little more in line with what I think, it's never going to be completely in line with me. And I'm not really sure I can support something that I don't fully and wholeheartedly support. And I just don't think political parties are designed for that. Now, I might run as independent at some stage for some role of some standing, But I don't think a party politics is really for me, because as you said, I don't want some guy calling me up going, actually, I can't say that. You're not allowed to say that. I want to make my own mind up on those things.
You want to be the person making that call saying you can't say that, mate.
Yeah, take down that stupid tweet, you moron. You're not supposed to be saying that, or you're not supposed to be in this hotel during a lockdown when all of you home and you're drinking with your mates. Yeah, I'm sure that'd be great fun too. But yeah.
And so I'm going to not take it back a bit, but going around the whole area of, at the moment we introduced you here, and you're probably getting introduced, as you said, in most places as 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old Harry McCann. Do you find that there will be a stage come where that won't be the defining character? And do you want that stage to come, if that makes sense, very soon? Or do you want to be that person still for another couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want my age to define me. It was my unique selling point for a very long time, and still probably is. But like, I suppose from an educational point of view, I always sought higher and further education for the simple fact that I've a lot of experience. I've had a lot of experience over the years. I'll have more experience as the years go on. But I'd like to be in a room as the expert in something, or as an authority on something, rather than being, the young person who can provide a generational view or insight. And that's something that I've always wanted to be. I've never sought education just so I can say I'm an expert in something, because I don't believe that, education necessarily equals being an expert. But I think from my point of view, it's that I've always tried to push myself forward and move myself forward. So there does come a stage where somebody introduces me as Harry McCann, the not expert on anything. I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. But
but whatever title they use for you anyway, it'll be Harry, and that'll be it.
Yeah, and that's like, I want to be an authority on something, and somebody go, oh, he's not just here because he's 22, but because he has X amount of years of experience and has this and that to offer. But like, I can't knock the 19, 20, 21, 22 thing, because I used it and it worked for me, and it's been a huge advantage for me in years gone by. So I don't knock it, but I just don't want it to be the ever defining thing, because I think when I become like 38, Harry McCann, he's 38 years old, it's probably going to sound a little less impressive.
They don't say your age when you get to that age. They just kind of you're just named at that stage.
You're old then.
Yeah, you're old. Yeah. You're not young. Never mind being old.
Yeah.
So the next stage, right? Going on from that, you started the digital media agency. You're going into the big bad world of marketing and branding and digital marketing. Where did that come from?
So I suppose I do have that fascination, as I said, with this idea that the dream of a connected world and the power of technology. I suppose that's always been something that's been big for me. And I've always I've always been a good communicator, I think, an effective communicator in many ways. And over the years, as time went on, people were asking for tips and tricks and advice on things. I've always done Twitter particularly well. I managed to do well there. I had good connections with those platforms. And then people were like, oh, well, maybe you could come look at what we're doing. And I suppose as time went on, I'm really interested, because there's a lot of, I suppose I look at marketing in the sense that, everybody has a product or everyone has a service or whatever it might be. But, when you're in a very competitive market, it's your story. It's the way you push across your messages. It's what's important to you. It's the why, not necessarily the how. And that's what I really want to try to push across for people, is that even if you are one of 1,000, you can still be, the unique one there. And I just think there's a lot to marketing for me. There's the storytelling aspect, there's the creativity point of view, there's the innovation point of view as well. And it's ever changing and ever evolving and ever moving. TikTok's the thing now. It's Snapchat a couple of years ago. It was Facebook at the beginning. And I just like that. It's, it's ever changing, ever moving, and there's no real boring days. There hasn't been anyway so far. I could be wrong, but I think it's just, for me, it's been something that's really fascinated and interested me, as somebody who likes that, moving and changing and swapping and jumping in and out things.
And when if a brand approaches you, what area is it social that you find yourself leaning more towards when you're starting to look at maybe strategy or day-to-day work? Is it the social side you're focusing more on?
Yeah, I usually, if a brand comes to me, it's that it hasn't worked for them or they haven't done it at all from a digital point of view. So it's usually very digital based. And it tends to be a lot of bits and pieces. I often find that people start off with the best intentions when it comes to social media and online and their brand online and their digital aspect. And then they get really good and they do certain parts of it really well. And then over time it becomes bitty and it becomes kind of scattered and it becomes a little less, important to them and a little less valuable. And they end up having a lot of really good stuff, but it's all messed up and mixed up. So I just try to clean things up a lot of the time and then really put a plan of action in place as well, because I think in a lot of cases for a lot of people, it's just a lack of a plan. So, it's trying to get things clean and tidy. It's as simple as having your logo done up, your color schemes, everything like that, obviously from a basic point of view, and then having, good content to support it. A lot of people come to me and they go, oh, we want to do social media, but we want to post, 16 times a week. And I'm kind of going, okay, how many times are you posting at the moment? And going, none. I was like, well, maybe you should set out like your expectations a little bit smaller, and then we kind of work our way up, And they go, oh, well, the guy across the road posts 15 times a day. And I look at the guy across the road and he gets 3 likes on one post and 2 likes on the other, and nobody interacts with the other one. I'm like, okay, but maybe we could do quality over quantity, and maybe we could try to beat those people and try to work our way up. And I've had clients, and a lot of them at the moment, who are doing that. They compare themselves to their neighbor if they're a business and an actual shop, or, a lot in the food and beverage and hospitality industry at the moment. They compare themselves, and I'm going to go, it's quality over quantity. So digital stuff is my kind of thing. Messaging is another big thing as well. What you actually do, trying to get that clean and slick and tidy. And then general kind of customer interaction as well is a big thing. A lot of brands get interacted with a lot by customers, but don't actually interact back. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that I hate messaging a brand about something, and they know they've seen it, but they just haven't come back to you, and that kind of annoys me a lot, especially when you rely on those kind of feedback and reviews and stuff. So I'm a bit of everything and a lot of nothing all at the same time.
As everyone, well, I'm the marketing has just gone boring, so.
Yeah,
it is like the majority of stuff you see out there nowadays is cat, it's just bored, same shit, different day.
What annoys me at the moment is I find I'm dealing with a lot of people who have been marketing for the last 20 years or so, and used to take out newspaper advertisements was their thing. We used to be newspapers, all traditional advertising, and then they jump into the social media stuff, and I'll go to a meeting and they'll question me on X, Y, and Z, but they've never even looked, or they've no idea how Instagram or Facebook or Twitter works, or none of those stuff, but they're trying to, manage it. And I'm kind of going, I'm not like, look, I'm not for pushing people out, but I'm like, you need to keep up with these trends and keep up and upskill yourself. And I kind of, that's what's frustrating for me, is that I'm trying to deal with people who never used it before, but seem to think they have an understanding of it. And that's what is frustrating at marketing at the moment. I think we're kind of in an interesting space where there's still a lot of people in marketing who are not very digitally focused or online focused, but have been with an organization or a brand or a business for a long time and then progressed. And as a result, those businesses are suffering.
You'll be there in 20 years' time now. There'll be some artificial intelligence advertising conglomerate. You'll be like, fuck it, no, what are the Instagram likes like? It's like, went out of business 10 years ago, mate. You're over, like.
I had a very funny conversation, and there'll come a day when somebody will play this back to me and goes, "You're the irrelevant one now, I suppose." But I have given out.
Oh, it happens, everyone.
Yeah, she was giving out to me about how I didn't have in every Instagram post I put up, I was like, click the link in our bio to find out more, or to buy this or to do this. And she goes, "Why don't you just put the link in the post?" And I was like, it's not how Instagram works. You can't do it. She goes, but you can. And we're talking to her, and you can't. And I'm like, but you see,
well, you can, you just can't do it and wish it.
Yeah, you just can't, it's useless.
You can put a series of letters that she
wasn't wrong, Harry.
She wasn't wrong.
No, she was, because it's not a link. She was wrong.
And I was like, but that for me was the biggest thing. And I'm like, it was just such an obvious thing. It was like somebody had never used Instagram before. And I was like, it's the equivalent of a barman not knowing that a Guinness should have a head on it, It's like, it's just so frustrating and annoying. But that's from my point of view, I suppose. But look, as I said, I'll be irrelevant in 20 years and somebody will be moaning about me and I'll be moaning about them. So I suppose it's a vicious circle.
You'll be giving out about the young people at that stage.
Complaining about the young ones who what's people say, young lads who never worked a day in their lives. That's what I get. I get a lot of that.
So you're moving now up into the world. What did you say you're going to study now? In where are you going? UCD?
DCU.
DCU.
I'm studying political communications for my sins.
And what's the planned outcome out of that?
Oh, good question. I don't know. I'm taking it one day at a time. I think, from my point of view, I have my hands in very, very many pies at the moment, and a lot of different opportunities. And from my point of view, I am, like as I said, I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. But I often think, being the master of none is being better than a master of one, in the sense that I want to try a lot of different things. I know for a fact that the stats and statistics support the idea that, I'll work 20 or 30 different jobs in my working life, because that's the world that we live in. It's ever changing and ever evolving. And I want to be somebody who changes and swaps and jumps in between things. It's funny, my biggest interest, I think, is probably in the radio sphere, which is gas, because people laughed at me a couple of years ago when I said that, and they're like, for a guy who loves change and moving worlds, you know, you want to jump into an age-old field of radio, but I think it's probably more relevant than ever before, especially with podcasts now. Obviously, it's just moving into a different space, a more digital space. So I think for me, radio would probably be the dream for a couple of years anyway. But I think I'll probably swap and change. So I'm not going to pick one thing, but I think from a digital point of view, a marketing point of view, radio, media, journalism, politics, it'll probably all tie into something in that sphere anyway. But I don't know. And you know, I'm not really bothered either. I'd worried about it a few years ago, trying to pick what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be. But at the end of the day, as I said, the stats supported, I'll probably work 20 or 30 jobs. So I'm in job whatever I am now, and I'll be in job whatever I'm going to be in a couple of years. But that's future Harry's problem anyway. So I won't.
Yeah, anyone who knows what they want to do at 22 is a moron, as far as I'm concerned. So that was a good answer.
Yeah, well, I want to change it. I know exactly what I want to be. No.
Be Taoiseach.
Our prime minister of the UK.
Yeah.
Oh God, can we put that part out?
There's no editing here.
Off the record.
Very good. Look, really appreciate really appreciate coming on. We're going to finish it up there. Thanks very much. Look, phenomenal career so far, and we wish you only the best going forward, and best luck to studies when you go into the new course. And thanks for joining us.
Cheers, lads. Appreciate it.
Cheers, Harry. Nice one.